Greetings from the wheat belt of Western Australia. Today we're going to read from Acts 23. It's about Paul before the High Council. Acts 23. Gazing intently at the High Council, Paul began, "Brothers, I've always lived before God with a clear conscience." Instantly Ananias, the high priest, commanded those close to Paul to slap him on the mouth. But Paul said to him, "God will slap you, you corrupt hypocrite. What kind of judge are you to break the law yourself by ordering me struck like that?" Those standing near Paul said to him, "Do you dare to insult God's high priest?" "I'm sorry, brothers. I didn't realize he was the high priest," Paul replied. "For the scriptures say, you must not speak evil of any of your rulers." Paul realized that some members of the high council were Sadducees and some were Pharisees. So he shouted, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, as were my ancestors, and I am on trial because my hope is in the resurrection of the dead." This divided the council, the Pharisees against the Sadducees, for the Sadducees say there is no resurrection or angels or spirits, but the Pharisees believe in all of these. So there was a great uproar. Some of the teachers of the religious law, who were Pharisees, jumped up and began to argue forcibly. "We see nothing wrong with him," they shouted. "Perhaps a spirit or an angel has spoken to him." As the conflict grew more violent, the commander was afraid they would tear Paul apart. So he ordered his soldiers to go and rescue him by force and take him back to the fortress. That night the Lord appeared to Paul and said, "Be encouraged, Paul. Just as you have been a witness to me in Jerusalem, you must preach the good news in Rome as well." So I thought this was quite an interesting passage, because Paul was being falsely accused by a bunch of religious people and the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And when he was in this pickle, God actually gave him wisdom. He gave him an angle, he gave him an approach, and this often happens in our lives. So Paul perceived and he recognized that some of these people were actually Sadducees, and some of them were Sadducees and some were Pharisees. And he immediately tried to get them to relate to him and saying, "Look, I'm also a Pharisee and I believe as you believe. So he was basically saying to them, if you accuse me of this, then you're accusing yourself." So it was a very, very clever way. And so they were then forced into a corner, and they were forced to stand up for Paul. And this is the wisdom of God. Whenever we find ourselves being falsely accused of stuff, God is able to give us wisdom in that situation, but we need to make sure that we are walking close to him, walking in the Spirit, seeking his will and seeking his wisdom on a situation. We can ask God for wisdom. Solomon asked God for wisdom, and the wisdom principally comes from spending time in the Word, spending time in the Spirit, and seeking God in all aspects of your life. So I just want to encourage you, in this passage, Paul was given great wisdom from God, and he used it. He obeyed the Lord, what the Lord was prompting him to say and do, and it gave him a way out. It gave him a protection in this particular situation, and it kind of divided the enemy in a way, and he was unable to know what to do with Paul. I also thought it was encouraging that God appeared to Paul as well and said, "Be encouraged, Paul. Just as you have been a witness to me here in Jerusalem, you must preach the good news in Rome as well." And this was kind of a subtle warning to Paul, because what was to come was a plot to kill him, and he had to stand trial elsewhere. So if you read the passage further, you'll see that. But I will leave that for another time. But what I wanted to point out here was that God was showing Paul ahead of time that he was still going to be alive, and he was still going to be able to preach the good news in Rome as well. So God was kind of indicating to Paul that he still had a ways to go, and that there was and that he didn't know he was about to face some more strife, but God was kind of hinting to him, and so the Lord gives us these little hints, these quiet whispers, these quiet prompts about our future and about a hope that we have. And we just need to continue to hold on to that as Paul did. And when we believe and we receive by faith, the Lord can do mighty things with us. So I hope you are blessed by this clip, and we'll touch base soon again.